What is the real reason you get reflux? And spoiler alert is that it is not because you have high stomach acid. Now, if you're one of these people that are having antacids or medications to lower your stomach acid because of reflux, it could be causing you more issues than you actually set out with in the first place. Now, disclaimer, 99% of the time, this is the case. But make sure you speak to a registered practitioner, licensed practitioner, whatever you want to call it, in order just to check with these things that I'm about to talk about and to see if they're actually going on with you. Now, I'm Ollie Matthews. I'm a healer working as a health and wellness coach for high achieving entrepreneurs that are going from the brink of burnout to push them all the way to true peak performance. We use functional medicine, nutrition, lifestyle coaching, and mindset and training work in order to truly make sure there's progression without any overwhelm. And reflux is something which a lot of people deal with. A lot of people are dealing with it, and we want to know the actual reasons why. Now, the first thing we have to think about is how we digest food. Now, what happens is that our brain gets a signal that we're going to be chewing food or we're going to be digesting food. If I tell you about this fudge cake, imagine this really nice chocolate fudge cake, really moist, really thick slice, got some nice icing on the top, some nice buttercream in the middle, and you're probably then going to start saliving or start producing saliva. And you get that Homer Simpson moment, as I call it, that donuts or fudge cake in this case. That's a thing called mastication. Make sure we don't say that wrong. It's a thing called mastication, and that's the first process of digestion before that food has even entered our mouth. Now, when that food comes into our mouth, we need to chew it. So we chew that food in order to increase its surface area because it makes it easier to digest. At the same time, there's enzymes in our saliva that help start breaking down that food, amylase. Then the food goes down our throat, through our esophagus, through our esophageal sphincter, this door basically to our gut, into our stomach. And then it's in there, we should have adequate amounts of hydrochloric acid, which has been signaled from the chewing, stomach acid, in order to help break down that food, start to degrade the proteins, and to signal to the pancreas to produce pancreatic enzymes to digest carbohydrates, along with other enzymes to help all these sorts of things go along, to signal to the gallbladder to actually signal bile to be produced and to be extracted, and help digest and break down the fats, going through large intestine and small intestine. Now, we need our brain to start signaling this. And when our brain is under severe amounts of stress, whether that's physical stress, whether that's psychological stress, we start getting mix-ups within our signals. Now, what actually happens as a result? We don't produce enough stomach acid. And that then doesn't produce the right carbohydrate enzymes or fat enzymes. So we can't break down this food as effectively as we want to. And that, as a result, we then don't get enough nutrients into our system. We don't absorb them as effectively. And that's where this term comes from, which I actually feel is a bit wrong. You are what you eat. You aren't what you eat. You are what you eat, digest, absorb, and don't excrete. Because essentially, putting food into our mouth, we should let the waste products go out. And that's another thing when we look at, I was speaking to a lady yesterday who signed up and she didn't go to the toilet for like 2-3 days. When we don't go to the toilet every 12 to 16 hours, getting rid of toxins, we then have the chance for those toxins to be reabsorbed into the system, which is very detrimental to our health. Not only that, if we don't get the chance to break down our food with these acids and enzymes, we then can't sterilize that food effectively. As a result, we open ourselves up for more infections. We open ourselves up to things like, if you've heard of things like candida or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, we open ourselves up for very many infections that can do harm further down the line. And that's where we need to look at our neurological function. If you're someone that you can't swallow supplements, you can't swallow pills, it's a red flag to me when a client comes to me and they say, Ollie, have you got a powder form of this supplement? Because I can't swallow that. that tells me there's something going on in their brain that is stopping them from being able to produce the enzymes or get their vagus nerve. I'm sure you've heard me talk about a vagus nerve before. Get their vagus nerve functioning. So we have to work on something called vagal tone, which plenty of information out there. In my Brain Fog Blitz course, there's a whole section on vagal tone and how to stimulate your vagus nerve. But gargling, working on your gag reflex, working on just singing out loud, maybe without other people around you if you really are that bad a singer. Coffee enemas, there's exercise, there's loads of things you can do to stimulate your vagus nerve, which will help because your vagus nerve is responsible for sending messages to your gut from your brain and other organs and all the way around your body, from your organs to your brain to produce enzymes, to get neurotransmitters firing and all these different things. So we want good vagal tone. We want good connectivity there. We want good communication with our vagus nerve to get communication from our brain downwards. And another thing that happens, if you're one of these people that you end up being the last to finish your food, and unless you're with me, I'm quite a fast eater and I've actually slowed down the way I eat and that improves my digestion. But if you're one of the people that's always last to finish your food, or you have to excessively chew your food, we should be chewing our food quite a bit. One of the tips I would say to people, if you're having digestive issues, just chew your food another 10, 15 times every mouthful. It can help because we're breaking down that food more, starting that digestive process in our mouth and actually increasing that surface area. So we want to be able to do that. Now, the reason we get reflux, as I've said, is due to inflammation of not having enough stomach acid, because we're not then able to degrade this food. And what happens is we have a little bit of stomach acid in there, and our little doorway that I've said, the esophageal sphincter, the doorway from the esophagus to our stomach, is not able to fit into the gap very well because of this inflammation. So it's slightly open. So when we get denatured protein, degraded protein, that is basically like putrefying protein, which isn't able to be digested, it's just sitting there and there's gases coming, which is going to push back to this esophageal sphincter. And we get into different positions, we bend over, we get reflux, or we eat something that we don't normally eat, we have a bit worse food, and we just cannot break this food down. Therefore, that then starts, as I said, putrefying, so we get this reflux. The problem I see people having is that we look to improve a neurological issue. If that's the case, we look to improve this neurological issue by fixing something which isn't actually the case, by taking lansoprazole or medications for lowering our stomach acid. That's going to add fire to fire. It's not going to be a good thing that happens because that low stomach acid basically goes to zero. So we start digesting even less and even less and even less of this food. So we get less and less and less nutrients. And whilst we're taking this lansoprazole, maybe we're not getting as much reflux, but then we have to stop it, or we don't look at the actual side effects of taking this for long periods of time because we're not getting the nutrients from our food. We stop that lansoprazole. And what then happens is we then start to see that we're just putting calories through our body. So what can we do to actually help this? As I've said, we can chew our food. We can make sure we are present when we are eating. One thing I look for people to do is to breathe a few times every time they actually start their meals. Like people say grace. I'm not very religious, so I don't say prayers or anything before my meals, but I do show gratitude, thankful for my meals, or just sitting there and having 4 or 5 deep breaths in through my nose, out through my mouth, to help my body get from the fight or flight mode to rest and digest mode. That really, really helps. We can look at our circadian rhythm, making sure we're getting sleep at the right times. Your digestive system works on a big body clock. And we look at stress exposure to the body. When your body is in a stressful state, it doesn't want to have blood in the digestive system to digest food. When our ancestors were running away from lions, the last thing they could even think about, the last thing they would even think about was digesting food. What's the point? I need to survive the lion before I get those nutrients. The same with hormonal production and everything like that. I need to survive this lion attack before I think about reproduction. So it takes blood away from there. It flattens your eyelids to get more peripheral vision. It makes that vision sharper. Our brain function is just a bit more wired, or when we're stressed. And all these things are things which will help us digest if we're not in that stress state. We get light exposure, it helps with our circadian rhythm. We get better brain function, it helps with our circadian rhythm. We start breathing. All these things make a lot of difference. So I would suggest looking into the things like, before we even think about what we're eating, that's a whole nother live in itself. It's a whole nother podcast in itself. All these things I go through in my Brain Fog Blitz course. And there's different videos onto what foods to have, what to take out. So if you want to look at the actual composition of meals, then have a look at the course, www.ojayhealth.com/brain fog blitz. But think about these things, because this stuff shouldn't be rocket science when we think of it logically. The more stress we put our body under, the harder it is going to be to digest. We're not going to break down these foods. And what actually happens, I find, is that people that aren't digesting their proteins very well because of lack of stomach acid, they're the same people that would then say, go vegan and say, oh, I felt so much better. And then 12 months down the line, they're not getting the right nutrients still, but they short-term start digesting their food better. But the issues still happen, that they're in that same place. And then they're worried about putting meat back in, not because of ethical reasons or anything like that, but because they're worried it'll make them bloated again. But it wasn't the meat that was causing it in the first place. It was the stress that the body was under. If you have questions on this, drop me a message. If you want to look further into one-to-one coaching, again, drop me a message or go to ojayhealth.com/contact. You can drop me a message. You can ask questions there. The Brain Fog Blitz course, 21 days to really look at blitzing your brain fog. We have multiple videos on there talking about morning routine, evening routine, how to optimize your day, what supplements are going to help you, what nutrition we should look at, how much we should move, how we can optimize our circadian rhythm and really improve our sleep and our digestion. Everything is in there that's going to help you basically stop burning out and blitz the brain fog for good. If you just want to get on my mailing list, then go to www.ojayhealth.com/burnout. You get a free download, which is called Is This Burnout? It's a presentation that is going to help you go through the leading symptoms of burning out to see if you've got any of them and how you can actually help yourself right now. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and let me know any topics you